Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
A very warm, appreciative welcome to Shosan Victoria Austin. She came to San Francisco Zen Center in 1975 after starting practicing Zen in 71. She received precepts in the 70s, was ordained a priest in January 82, and received Dharma transmission from Mel Weitsman in 99. She's been teaching Iyengar yoga for 20 years, is a past president of the San Francisco Zen Center, and a past tanto, which is the head of practice at Tassajara. She's currently serving as outreach director of the San Francisco Zen Center, helping make the Dharma accessible in a variety of sessions.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
So first I want to ask, is this being taped for your personal?
No, for the group website.
Oh, for the group website, because there may be parts of this that we don't want to have on the website. There may be parts of this that we don't want to have on the website. Because I thought I would speak a little bit personally, or ask you a little bit personally. So, do you have the capability of editing this before you?
If you request it on the tape, George will drop it out.
Okay.
Yes, we do that. We can do that.
Okay, that's good. So you guys can decide. And so who's responsible for deciding?
Well, the program committee would take that into consideration.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Okay, because first, before I hit you with any specific section of the Buddha Dharma, since most of us haven't met personally, I thought it might be good to know what's actually most important for you today, now. And so if you would have a one-word brainstorm, doesn't have to be one word actually, that's just an excuse to make it easier to say something about what is important for you now. What are you here for? What question do you have? What issue do you need to address? And this issue do you need to address is the part that might not be appropriate for the website. Because just even as I look around me at the group of people today, I was reflecting that probably many of us share a history in terms of the sickness, old age, and death piece of our lives that we have to deal with every day. That in 1980 to 83, I was at Tassajara, and I heard the rumors, the first rumors about what was happening back in my home neighborhood. And then from then on, from the day I got ordained until now, there's always been someone sick or dying in my life who I've been working with. And now there is two. And the drugs and the advances and everything that has happened hasn't really diminished the emotional impact of knowing that I or my friends or my students or my kind of adopted families or anybody, that we all have swords hanging over our heads. And that those closest to us have this. And that, maybe each of us might personally know between 20 and 75 people who have been hit and hit hard by AIDS, by social kind of social death or dismemberment in certain ways, by a whole slew of heavy things that are constantly at the bottom of our lives. And that part of why we sit in meditation, of course, is to have a place in which we're free of sickness, old age, and death. In which sickness, old age, and death can be here, and that we don't have to be running from that. And at the same time, there's a measure of serenity or peace that then we can take as we hold somebody's hand or decide what to do, and so on. So this is why I was thinking I don't necessarily want to have this talk blasted out on the web, because there may be some things that we want to speak about in here, in a safe place, that we wouldn't necessarily want 15 million of our closest friends listening to. So anyway, you get to decide how much. And as you see, the gentleman on my right is, not only is he golden and kind of beautiful in a variety of ways, but also he has one hand in the meditation mudra holding a bowl, and the other hand is touching the ground. And this is not accidental. The bowl is a medicine bowl. That's a bowl, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a medicine bowl. And the hand is touching the ground. Do you remember the story of the earth touching? Has anybody not heard it? Tell us.
Tell us again.
Tell us again, okay. I will. I'll try to tell me again too. So us. Yeah, so I don't know if you remember that the Buddha, before he was the Buddha, when he was still Prince Siddhartha Gautama, and after he had wrestled with the emotional impact of sickness, old age, and death, in the form of seeing a sick person, an old person, and a dead person, even though his parents had, this is the backstory, had really, really tried to keep him from ever seeing any such thing, and had surrounded him with sex and glamour and wealth and power to try to keep his mind on this world and not on weird spiritual matters. So after all that, he realized what it was that he had to do, that he had to leave his family and leave his power and wealth and prestige and go off by himself into the forest to do things that only he could do and to see things that only he could see. And he did, and he stood over his wife and his baby son, who was maybe this big, and said goodbye. Went off into the forest, cut his hair, then went and studied with two of the greatest yoga teachers of the time, did everything that they could show him to do, had all the insights possible that it was that he could have in their ashrams, was invited to teach, and then rejected that because he had to follow his heart. He had to. And that was the message of many lifetimes, not even just this lifetime, but of all his past lifetimes had told him that he had to follow his heart. And so he did. And so he even said goodbye to those teachers with whom he had had insights. And then he started desperate measures. Okay, well, I need to find out the root of suffering. I need to find out what to do to address it. I need to find out what to address it, not just for me, but everybody else. And how is there a cure of suffering? All these yoga practices that I've been doing in the way that I've done them, all these techniques that I've learned have alleviated the suffering for a little bit. But then as soon as I exited the meditation state or the pleasure-induced trance or whatever, I was right back where I started. So I know. I'll be ascetic, and then maybe the suffering will be starved into submission. So he actually subsisted on 1 grain of rice a day, 1 lentil, and it says his skin changed color and started falling off of him, and he got really skinny. And it said in the sutra that you could see his backbone through his stomach, and that his skin was just hanging off of him. And and he had some brothers in deciding to do ascetic practices, and they made a pact. Said, okay, we're blood brothers. We are not going to stop our ascetic practices until we actually wake up. And but then one night the Buddha realized, this is nuts. Why am I doing this? Because I can starve my ego into submission, and along with it the ability to suffer. But it's not doing me any good. It's not actually addressing suffering in any way. I'm just weakening the whole system. And not only that, but I'm using part of my mind to fight and kill another part of my mind. This is not working. And so he was wandering around in a kind of bemused state, having had this insight into his behavior, when a young woman, Sujata, who was a farmer's daughter, came along carrying a bowl of rice cooked in milk. And she took one look at him and she said, oh, homeless guy. Do you want something to eat? And he was kind of standing there deciding what to do. And he remembered that he had actually been in a state free of suffering at one time. And it was back when he was a little kid, and the king and queen, his parents, had a picnic and a festival with magicians and all kinds of stuff. Beautiful parasols and flowers and, just tables and tables of food and lots of people and splendor. And not particularly interested, he had wandered away and sat under a tree and felt really happy. Not suffering, not suffering, but just satisfied in a very deep way. And he said, oh, that's it. So when the young girl held out the bowl of food, he was inspired to say, oh, yeah, well, that was kind of in the middle. I guess I've been starving myself. And he said, yes. And he ate the milk rice and went down to the banks of the Naranjara River and bathed himself in the water. That was another thing about being an ascetic. You weren't supposed to wash your hair or your scalp if you didn't have hair, or bathe or wear clean clothes or anything. And you weren't really supposed to take care of yourself, but he did. He went down to the banks of the river, and when he stood up, he felt refreshed. And he said, I'm going to go find a tree. So on the way to the tree, he passed his buddies, and they said, as you might expect, traitor. Clearly you've sold out on us and we're not going to pay any attention to you anymore. Go on your way. And he did. He wandered around and finally he found a beautiful tree with wide protective branches and right on the bank of the river and sat down. And in the first watch of the night, Mara came to him. And Mara is suffering in a personified form, kind of the illusory aspect of suffering. And Mara said, "Hey, have I got a deal for you?" And Mara first sent armies of scary demons, with all the things that Gautama had ever had nightmares about, flew at him all at once. And he said, "Sorry, I know who you are and what you're trying to do. No way." And he kept sitting. Then Mara said, "Okay, so that won't work? All right." So Mara sent all sorts of sexual images in front of the Buddha. And, they were dancing and doing all the things that they do. And Buddha said, "I see through you. I know what you're trying to do. You can't fool me that way. I'm sitting right here." And he did. And then Mara tried the most the most unkindest cut of all. He said, "So you think you're pretty big, huh?" I'm sure he said it a different way, but I'm from New York, so he said, "So you think you're something? Well, if you take a look at me, I've got all kinds of witnesses to my position and my practices." And he did. He had a huge array of, death, despair, and, seduction, temptation, doubt, just huge armies of allies on his side, witnessing to his position. And he said, "And look at you. You're just a guy in a loincloth. You don't have anybody. You don't have anything. You don't even have a right to what you think you're trying to do. You think you can be enlightened? You? Who are you trying to kid?" Anyway, it was a lot worse than that. I don't have I'm not in the mood. So I'm sitting here on the Dharma seat, so I can't actually, fortunately, give you the full force of what Mara said to Buddha. But you should know that it was incredibly cutting, and it cut right to the core of of what would have been his self-esteem if he had been motivated by self-esteem, and right to the core of his sense of self-worth, right to the core of his any possible doubts that he might have about his mission to wake up and help people, and was devastating. The most devastating thing that you could think of. That's what Mara said. And the Buddha was cut and looked into himself and drew himself up to his height and looked inwards. And then he breathed and touched the earth, and he said, "The earth is my witness." And actually the earth was very happy to hear this and trembled 6 ways. And that was the moment when Gautama really became the Buddha because he took refuge in the ground of his life. And then Mara said whatever the equivalent was of curses, foiled again, and went away. And the Buddha kept sitting under the tree. And as the night progressed, from that vulnerability and that groundedness came many insights. So because he was completely vulnerable to what would arise in him, completely dedicated to waking up, completely grounded in his sitting posture, and had prepared himself well, insights began to arise in him, and they were complete insights. So the first thing that he saw was all kinds of beings, how they had come to be, and what their condition was. And he saw how their happiness came to be, how their suffering came to be, and so on. And then he saw into his past lives, the thousands and thousands of past lives that he had had, all the conditions that he had been in, all the questions that had arisen for him, all the resolutions that had happened, and so on. And as the night was ending and before the dawn came, he saw how things arise and pass away. When this kind of thing happens, that kind of thing happens. If this doesn't happen, that doesn't happen. And he saw the truth of how things arise and pass away. He saw that suffering arises from ignorance. And he saw the way it comes to be. That from ignorance arises a certain set of conceptions which give rise to a certain psychophysical personality which actually influences our perception and the contact we have with it, the way we relate to it, whether it's with desire or with aversion or whatever. And so what we want out of it influences how we actually see things and people. And after that, that depending on how we see it, thoughts come into beings and actions, and they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so they arise for the good of ourselves and others, or for the ill of ourselves and others. But if we understand that there are certain points of change, that past pain, that we can't actually get at past pain now, but we can resolve it and not start it over. That we can control our actions at the point where they arise. That we actually have a moment of choice before we say or do something, and that if we notice the suffering of what we're saying and doing, we can actually notice the suffering associated in the thoughts and perception process that underlies it. And if we trace that thought and that perception in its own suffering back, we can understand how our desires and our preconceptions shape our reality. If we trace that back, we can understand that all desire and aversion arises from the suffering quality of it arises from a fundamental misconception about how we are, about what is. That all of it, the whole play, arises from a view of self and other as separate, and a lack of understanding about how things arise and actually go away. And so he saw that in the last watch of the night, and then the morning star came up over the horizon. And spontaneously he said, wow. Actually, it reports that he said, wonderful. The sutra reports, wonderful. I now see that all beings, without exception, are fully endowed with all the equipment necessary for awakening, complete awakening. But because of their habits and preconceptions, they don't realize it. I and all beings wake up at the same time. And that was the story of his waking. And the turning point was this: touching the ground. So, in honor of the Buddha, we have a practice of touching the ground. And we don't walk around with our hands on the floor or anything, but, or some of us do, but not many of us. But we have a practice of touching the ground. And that practice is to sit upright and let the thoughts come and go. Let them settle and clarify of their own accord. Must be time for something.
Hot water.
Hot water, okay. So, life clarifies around this when we are sitting in contact with the most basic of things that are happening, or things as it is, as Suzuki Roshi said. So what's most important to you today, by the way? I want to know. I'm actually interested. This is an autumn sort of story. We often do 90 days of self-study, followed by a meditation retreat that coincides with the Buddha's own touching the earth. So this is a good time for this. What is actually important to you this fall or this week to study? My way of approaching the Dharma with you isn't that I have a canned thing to give you. It's more I'm really interested in you because you are interested in studying yourself.
Yeah, well, I don't know, it's very appropriate for me to go over this now. Week before last, my sister came out to visit, and she's 2 years and 9 months younger than I am. And then she almost didn't come because she thought she was getting pneumonia, but she'd been sick with bronchitis, and she's overweight, and she just found out she has diabetes, and she was out for about 9 or 10 days, and I took great pleasure in being able to just let her rest and to have moderate activities. At the same time, it really started me getting depressed because she's my only sibling, and as adults we've been very close, and to see her, she's younger than I am, and she's so weak, and she's so sedentary. And then I came back up here, this was in Santa Barbara, and I was supposed to go to Croatia on Friday with an older woman friend, a long-time older woman friend, and about a week before she started having troubles, and they found out she had a cancer tumor on her stomach and had surgery last Monday. And it's just that these two people who are close to me, and it's really thrown me. I can know all this stuff, and I've meditated and everything, but just to have it come close that way, and I've had these feelings of being depressed and being afraid, just afraid in this sort of general way, so that it's just been hard to go through this, to have this old age sickness and death come before me. and then I start feeling old, sick, and on the brink.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, how many people have somebody are facing an issue like this right now? Okay. So, I wonder if we could just do a very simple thing for us and for them. Let's see. Is there a chant that everybody in this room knows? No? Okay. Well, let's make one up.
You teach us one.
Okay. How about may you be well. May you be... Let's start with may I be well. Okay, how's that? May I be well. May I be happy. May I be joyous. And live in safety. Free from suffering. And the causes of suffering. Is that a good one? Should we start with that? Let's just say it another 2 times together, if we could. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Okay? So that's a chant. Yeah. Could we have a name, please, for your sister?
My sister?
Yeah.
Heather.
May Heather be well. May Heather be happy. May Heather be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May Heather be well. May Heather be happy. May Heather be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May Heather be well. May Heather be happy. May Heather be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. How about your friend? What's your friend's name?
Francis.
Francis? Can we say it once for Francis? May Francis be well. May Francis be happy. May Francis be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Anybody have a name to say this for? Yeah. Why don't we just go around? And yeah, okay. Anybody have a name? Just
Rita.
May Rita, yes. May Rita be well. May Rita be happy. May Rita be joyous and live in safety, free from suffering and the causes of suffering.
Henry.
May Henry be well.
May Henry be happy. May Henry be joyous
and live in safety,
free from suffering
and the causes of suffering. If it helps, you can hold hands too. There's no rule against that. Or you can sit in meditation posture. Any other?
Carrie.
May
Carrie be well.
May
Carrie be happy. May Carrie be joyous
and live in safety,
free from suffering
and
and
the
the
causes
causes of suffering.
Kyle.
May
May
Kyle
Kyle be well. May Kyle be happy. May Kyle be joyous
and live in safety,
free from suffering
and the causes of suffering. We can also sit just in silence and put names in. So, what makes this practice different from another practice is this is called metta practice, and you've probably done it before. And what makes metta practice work, and it does work, is that we're not separate from ourselves or each other in the way that we usually think. We're not objects, they're not objects, they're not outside ourselves. When we say something like this, we actually address the wrong view of thinking that Heather or Francis or Kyle or Henry or Rita is actually separate in some way and would ever be separate in some way. Like, I don't know if any of you knew John King.
He spoke here.
He spoke here.
I'm
Okay.
glad to talk about him.
Yeah.
That's talking to it,
Yeah, okay. So John was my Dharma nephew. Blanche is my Dharma sister. And I knew John for a very long time. So John was impeccable. I think... But what stands out right now is not his impeccability, but how he used to come to my office with a box of coffee nips and hand them out. Say, would you like a coffee nip? And so, in the one hand, it's just kind of simple-minded. John's handing out candy. But in another way, that contact that you can have now with somebody, even though nothing is certain, ever, contact based on the fact that we're not separate, is one of John's biggest lessons. And this is what I actually do. I'm going and visiting my mother in New York every 8 weeks. And when I started practicing Buddhism, my mother had me deprogrammed. And then she couldn't really speak with me for 15 years. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was scared of me, scared of what I was doing. And actually, the thing that allowed her to speak with me and trust me again, there were two things. One was that I had her interviewed for the Holocaust Oral History Project for the children. And the other thing was that she had heard from a third source that I was visiting my friends with AIDS. And she could understand that. So it's like karma works in very mysterious ways. We don't know how it works or what the connection is or what the meaning is and so on. We have no idea. We have no idea. The same Holocaust that caused her to be enormously threatened by my Zen practice allowed her to appreciate practice enough to talk to me after she had previously disowned me. So it's all very, we don't know how it's going to work. But what we do know is that if we cultivate an attitude of kindness and connection with each other based on looking at each other and seeing Buddha in each other's eyes, that will make a difference in ourselves and in the person who we're relating to. And this is the basis of metta practice. It's a practice of the heart based on an insight. And so sometimes we don't know, we don't really think that we've had that insight, so we look at somebody and we only see an object of aversion or desire or someone we don't really know. But you'll notice, in a way it's like whole wheat. First you get a whole wheat cracker and it doesn't taste like anything, but if you chew, you taste all kinds of complex flavors, like a kind of earthy flavor and a saltiness and a sweetness at the same time, a kind of roughness and a kind of smoothness all at the same time. And there's a kind of good, wholesome taste. And it's just that way with experiencing our experience is not separate from ourselves. So you might not have faith that the person that you're with is not separate from you, or that you might not think, I can influence their situation at all. After all, the hospital's going to take care of that, or the doctor's going to take care of that. But I'm telling you that metta gives a different taste to what's going on, just as chewing gives a different taste to whole wheat. So this is not one of your planned dharma talks that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is what I'm asking for is a dharma interaction that does not have a beginning, a middle, or an end. And this is actually in accord with Suzuki Roshi's teaching. Suzuki Roshi had many teachings and was an incredibly subtle and wonderful teacher. But his main talent was that he could look at anybody and see Buddha looking back at him. And that's how he transformed American life, through introducing his style of Soto Zen Buddhist practice. That's how the Buddha transformed life for the people who ended up following him. There's all kinds of stories about the Buddha. One day, there were people who didn't think that they were good enough to practice in his way, because the India at that time had it was dominated by the caste system, and so there were untouchables whose shadow couldn't cross the water that a higher caste person would drink. And so there are a lot of stories. One day, there was a man who emptied the night buckets, the night soil, and so of course he was the lowest of the low. And he heard the Buddha and company approaching and shrank back, trying to find a place to hide. And the Buddha, and he looked down, and he happened to see a pair of feet in front of him. And then he looked up, and it was the Buddha looking at him. He said, and looking at him as if they were the same. And he said, "Oh, please, you've got to stay away from me. I'm a night soil carrier," as if it weren't obvious that he had his bucket, he stank, and everything. But he said, "No, you shouldn't be anywhere near me. I'm a night soil carrier. Please don't let your shadow cross my shadow because you're going to be defiled." And the Buddha looked at him and said, holiness Brahma doesn't have anything to do with your occupation. You are an exalted person if you study yourself and if you have insights and if you're kind. And you're untouchable if you don't study yourself and you don't have insights and you're not kind. And then the guy was looking at him in disbelief. I can't believe that the Buddha stopped in front of me and is talking to me. And you know what the Buddha's next words were? "Come, monk." And the Buddha admitted that man into his family of monks. And the guy became a teacher. Anyway, it's that kind of story. Is a big feature of the Buddha's life. And it wasn't just someone high being kind to someone low, or someone well being kind to someone sick. Because what the Buddha taught was that the deathless part of you looks into the deathless part of somebody else. That everybody is free of sickness, old age, and death, and we meet there. And that in the part of us that's not free of sickness, old age, and death, we can be kind. So practice is good in the realm in which we're limited, and practice is good in the realm in which we're unlimited. And it's not an obscure thing at all. It's just our regular, plain, old daily life. So can you meet each other and the people you meet from this place? And it actually, true, it gives us the strength to bear almost anything. But that's not what's most important. It's true that seeing the world and each other this way makes us happier human beings. But that's not what's most important. I think what's most important is that this way of being is so much like how things actually are that we don't have to be scared or anxious in our lives. We don't have to suffer in our lives. It's just we can live completely normal lives, just appreciating the lives, appreciating everything that happens, whether it seems good or whether it seems bad. A monk once came to Joshu and said, "I'm here to practice." And Joshu said, "Have you had breakfast yet?" And the monk said, "Yeah." And Joshu said, "Okay, wash your bowl." That's it. There isn't anything apart from that even 35 years of practice can say. Have you had breakfast? Great. The bowl. That's it. But it's not just like, okay, you had breakfast? Okay, wash your bowl. That's not what it means. It's like, this is it. This is the life. If someone is sick, you may have to say, okay, I'm coming. I'm coming to your doctor's appointment with you. And I'm going to take notes. And I'm here for you. And that may be what you do next. If someone gets better, you say, God, I'm relieved. Congratulations. You know? This is life. This is what we have to deal with. There isn't anything outside of this. So, anyway, I brought these sutras to talk about, but I didn't. Because looking at you and understanding what's going on for me, this is what happened instead. So please feel free to ask or comment or anything. Give a name if you're going to walk out of here thinking, oh no, I didn't give a name. But actually, you know, one of my fairly close friends was just diagnosed with breast cancer this week and may have to have a double mastectomy. And so I called her, I left a message on her answering machine. She's not answering phone calls. And said, okay, we're going to do a well-being ceremony on Tuesday. Tuesday morning at 6:30. I'm doing a well-being ceremony for you. I'm going to chant your name. And just send my thoughts, send my wishes. And I took that time to be with her. I said, don't answer my call if you're not answering calls. This is not about me. So a lot of the people who have had well-being ceremonies said, 6:30 on Tuesday came around, and I realized that people were chanting for me, and it didn't change anything, but everything was different. So, what can I say? Any questions? Comments? Anything? Okay.
Are you available for questions afterwards as well?
What time is it now?
Just about 12.
I can for a minute, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.